I really enjoy conference weekend. I think it's two of the best weekends of the year, and it's such a pleasure to be able to participate in those. Generally, me and my family just sit in our basement and watch it, but it's always such a relaxing and spiritually uplifting weekend in the year. And so, preparing for it, I always try to pray to be able to find things and take messages out of it that I need and that I'll be able to apply to my life. And so I always try to start with three questions that I am looking to be answered and know that God has a way of giving us answers and giving us these solutions that we need. And I that's why I love conferences. Just I think that modern day prophets and apostles, they have more answers than any of us, and even answers about things that aren't directly related to the gospel. And so it's always so good to hear from them. And I think that a lot of times this is something that I've kind of been thinking a lot about since this last conference weekend. I think conference is such a personal experience for most people, and it can be so just individual to people if we take the time out to look for those things, because I believe every talk that's in there and every message that someone has to share, it can somehow be applied to all of our lives, and I think that's so important. So I tried to narrow it down to like three main topics that they talked about this weekend or last weekend. Um, and for me, those three topics ended up being Easter, peace, and just finding revelation and personal revelation for my future. So I really like that they talked about Easter since it was just a week apart. And I think it's oftentimes an overlooked holiday. I think a lot of times people think more about Christmas, and that was a common topic too, is how people brought up traditions of Christmas and things like that. But without Easter, there is no Christianity, and without Easter, there's no way for us to have those blessings that we find so valuable and we hold so valuable in our lives. And so it's so important to celebrate that and appreciate that tradition and that holiday more. And the and it kind of just it's all centered around the importance of the resurrection and the gifts that that Christ sacrificed himself to be able to give us. And so thinking about those, I kind of narrowed it down to these main ideas that we can always go back to when thinking about Easter and when trying to honor Easter. I think it's about remembering how Christ can make us whole. He can make us whole in any situation from any imperfection. And he is I kind of feel like he neutralizes insecurities. I think obviously all of us are imperfect and there's things that we want to change. And through Christ, I know that those insecurities can be changed, and those are things that we can always grow from. Going along with that, it's Easter is also about being able to return to heaven and live with our heavenly families again. And so I think that's such an important theme to remember as well, just how we're always given second chances and we always have those opportunities. So the next thing that I kind of got out of conference was peace. I think people talked a lot about peace because our world is in constant, I don't know, turning, and there's always some conflict and agreement between people these days. And so peace is so important. And there were a lot of speakers that talked about peace and how we are supposed to be peacemakers as we're followers of Christ. That's what Christ would do, and he is the Prince of Peace. And if we're trying to be like him, we need to be that peace that people can find in the world. There was one speaker that talked about having poise even in the hardest times. And I think when you think back to like the Garden of Gethsemane and things, Christ felt all of these burdens and all of these pains. And I think that through that all, he had that poise. And so I was talking to someone not too long ago, and we were talking about peace and how it's something that we need to have and it's something that we need to exemplify, but it's not always easy to have, especially in the world that we live in. And he told me that he didn't really know how to define peace. After conference, I was kind of thinking about that, and I think peace is just a state of being where nothing is crowding out our minds, and we always have room to think about the gospel and about our savior. And I think that's the peace that we look for in this world, is that we aren't thinking about things that don't really matter, but we're thinking about our savior and the gospel, and that is what our lives are centered on. And that just kind of takes away all the negative feelings and the evil feelings that are in our world today. But if we can find that peace and we can be that peace, that's kind of like the state of being that I think it is. And I wish I would have thought of that when I was talking to him, but I I didn't. And I thought about it afterwards, but that's kind of what I think peace is. And I think that's the important of it and the importance of it. And that's why our apostles and prophets wants us to have it, because we'll be able to help others find that. And I think it's just a great way to be a missionary, and that leading by example, even if we're not missionaries in the field, we can be missionaries elsewhere. And starting with peace is kind of a way that we can start ministering to people. The third thing I kind of thought about was my own future. So going back to those questions that I started conference with, I'm a senior and I'm graduating, and there's a lot of things that I need to decide, and kind of just trying to decipher where I want my future to go. And it's kind of a crazy question to go into conference with, seeing as they're talking about the gospel. But I think we can find any type of answers through conference. And there was a lot of topics about personal revelation and how we're going to be able to change the world. I think it was in Elder Gong's talk. He said lives are waiting to change, and Christ is that ability to change. And I think that's kind of where I want my life to go, is just being able to be that light for other people. As well as when I think about my future, I think one of the main things I want is kids. And with how the world has been going and how it's been looking, I feel like that's also been one of my greatest fears recently, is having kids and being able to raise kids in this world, just because it's so crazy. But then there was a lot of talks about how if parents center themselves on Christ, and how if we have kids, they are going to be the hope of those latter days, and they're going to be the hope that this world has, and they're going to bring back that light. And so I think it kind of just restored a lot of hope for me, and it gave me a lot of insight into what I want in my life, and how I can obtain it through Jesus Christ and through the gospel, and how I just need to stay close to that. So I think those were probably my main takeaways. I think conference was amazing, but those are the main things I thought about and was able to journal and write about afterwards. So in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.